Hello and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and today I'm joined by Savon Jones, aka Captain Vonnie. This is episode 105, and we talk The Woman King, starring Viola Davis. I'm confident that it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Hello, Savonelman. Gentleman. Savon, what's up? We're without Brian again.
I'm chilling. It's still a lovely day, and I'm just glad. It's just one of those. I'm glad it's Saturday type vibes.
All right.
Gotta
Savon
be able to just
bringing
lean
the
into
mellow
enjoy the
vibes
weekend.
to this show.
Yo, you gotta just lean. Sometimes you gotta lean into enjoy the week. It's Saturday. I'm feeling good. I might not go outside. Maybe I will. I don't know. But either way, I don't have to labor. That's good enough for me.
Hell yeah. I do have to do some work. I've been on spring break and have not done any, so I need to do some.
Yeah.
All right, this episode, it's going to be a short one. Short, quick, fun. The Woman King. It's available on Netflix. Got a lot of buzz kind of at the end of last year. A lot of good word of mouth. Savon, you want to talk about the premise or you want me to?
I'll talk about the premise. So,
all right, tell us. Without spoiling it. People maybe haven't seen it. Maybe they want to see it.
Yeah. So the premise of the film is that it takes place during the 1800s. It is about the Agoji tribe, which was an all-female warrior unit. They were in the Dahomey kingdom in West Africa, and a kingdom that existed for multiple centuries. The premise of the movie is that Viola Davis stars as the general. She's the badass general of this female fighting unit, and the basic plot of the story is just, okay, what are her experiences trying to train the people to continue to protect her village and home, and then the conflicts they come into with neighboring we'll say factions, because there's different, I think there's multiple antagonists in the movie, but how they fight to survive against multiple factions who threaten their way of life and existence. Like, that's the premise, and then you get a lot of cool, just badass characters trying to, defend their homeland from problems. That's the meat and potatoes of the movie.
Yeah, it's Wonder Woman, but better,
Yeah, a little more historically grounded, and yes, better. Less supernatural, but I would say better.
Well, and there is some basis in actual history for this. There was a real tribe called the Dahomey, who did sort of some of this stuff and did have some warrior people that pushed back against the onslaught of colonialism and slavery and all of that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into it without spoiling too much. What or who stands out to you in this movie? You can start us off.
I'll keep it simple. What stood out to this movie the most is just the premise itself. One of the reasons I really enjoy even just like the Black Panther 1 and 2 is that you don't get to see a lot of movies that have all Black women leads and then them getting put into all very drastically different dynamic roles. That was one of the best things I enjoyed about Black Panther 1 and 2, Wakanda Forever, and it's something that stood out to this movie. So that alone is something that, it doesn't make the movie, but it piques my interest a little bit of, okay, this isn't what your typical Hollywood, those movies generally might not get as much just financial or even just like support the premise of putting it out. So that part of it kind of drew me in a little bit. But what I enjoyed most, honestly, what I really liked about the movie that drew me in is that this just felt like something that I haven't seen a movie or show be made about, and it was very refreshing. I've seen a million shows, movies, and games about, ancient civilizations. There's lots of ancient civilizations, not even ancient, but older civilizations that get lots of media coverage, right? Like, we've seen every damn show and movie on the planet about the Vikings. We have like 5 different iterations of Thor in the pop culture right now floating around at any, there's Assassin's Creed Thor, there's MCU Thor, there's God of War Thor, there's just historical Thor. Don't get me started.
The Northman or something. Yeah.
Good Lord. DC loves to just take actual just like white gods or mythos and just make them into just straight characters. Like, all right, we're gonna just take Hercules and Zeus and all the Greek gods, and they're just our original IP characters now. There's a lot of you don't get a lot of interesting stories about African warriors. Just period. You definitely don't get a lot about women African warriors that are based on real people that existed. So I was going into this movie already thinking, no matter how they spin this, it's not really going to be something that I've seen before, which drew me in because a lot of movies do feel derivative. They're remakes, it's the same story told a million times, whatever. So yeah, I mean, I felt like I was just getting a lot that I hadn't seen in other stuff. And then the biggest one is that this is just a really good cast of just genuinely talented actors. Like, the biggest thing about the movie was that there are no weak links in this movie in terms of the acting. Viola Davis is a heavyweight and is, a big dog. John Boyega has proven himself and he knows what he's doing. Lashana Lynch, we've seen her like none of these people are green and don't know what they're doing. And even not one of the, least experienced members of the cast, what is it, Tuso?
Uh-huh.
Help me out, Wes.
Tuso and Bedu.
Thank you. Tuso and Bedu, like, she's, one of, like, I think this is one of her debut feature-length, like, American films for certain, but even her, she absolutely carries her weight and has multiple scenes with Viola Davis where I'm like, oh, this is a heavyweight and a young gun, and they're both just going blow for blow acting-wise. So, to me, it was just the premise and then the pedigree of the people in the movie already kind of had me more enthralled than maybe if that wasn't the case.
Yeah, Savon told me a fun fact that Tuso in real life is older than him. So she's something 31, 32. And in the movie, very much plays someone who's like a teenager type character.
Yeah, she's supposed to be like 19.
Yeah, they don't tell us how old she is, but...
No, they do. They do.
Oh, they do? Okay.
She says
So,
I'm 19.
A very young person, and I was very convinced that she was that age or very close to that age, and definitely not. She's had, in real life, she's definitely a regular adult. She's got her shit together, basically. So I think what stuck out to me was just there was like a lot to soak in on screen and in this culture that they sort of built, and the different places that they visited. You really got a sense that this was that the writers and the directors and the actors had spent a lot of time thinking about what are these different traditions that we're going to show, what are these different artifacts we're going to show, and how do they tie into the world that's here and the culture that's here and the people that are here. And it definitely felt like everything they were doing was, it was practice. Everyone bought in, everyone had seen it before. And there were just so many examples of that, different ceremonies that we got to see, different celebrations, different, procedures and parades that were going on. And it just felt like, oh, these are the things that happen with regularity in this tribe or in this kingdom, and the people understand how they work. And it just felt like there was so much about the society we learned about, especially in the first, half an hour, 20 minutes, about how things worked and how they were different than, American society, but how they had kind of their own way of doing things. And it just felt really fleshed out. It didn't feel like, oh, this is just a two-dimensional space and, just some generic, quote unquote African setup. It actually felt like, okay, this is a real place with their own traditions that, are not necessarily the same as other traditions you'd find in a different tribe. Like, these are specific to these people. And I thought that was just really cool to see something play out like that, where everyone had thought really deeply about what are these traditions and these actions going to look like within this tribe or within this kingdom. So I thought that was cool. And like you said, the actors were just really phenomenal. And then I think the other thing that really stands out is the action sequences. There's just some brutal, visceral fights that occur, and a lot of them are hand to hand because of the time in which they were supposed to be filming this or showing
18
yeah,
minutes.
There just isn't a ton of like, firearms, firepower available. We're still working in the, in the era of rifles that need to be loaded and powdered and cleaned and all that, and you get one shot. So, that's not the main way of fighting here. It's just a really visceral, just tons of set pieces that end up being just very like whoa, and some cool choreography that we haven't seen very much of. A lot of neck slitting though, and stabbing just right through the torso.
Yeah. Hey, it's a quick way to take some, very efficient.
Yeah.
None of those just superficial cuts. Kill shots only.
So that's also stood out to me, and there are some strengths, and we'll talk about those as we go through the show. Were there any hiccups for you? I think to me, the relationship between I'm not going to spoil it. So one of the Goji, one of the women warriors, has kind of a relationship with this guy who's like European but has some connection in his past to Dahomey. I didn't need it. It didn't really seem to play a big role, and it just felt like they couldn't give enough time to it. So it just felt a little bit rushed and like not that meaningful. And at the end, it sort of doesn't matter. And so I thought that to me was like, like they should have just left that out. I get what they were like. Well, we want to make this like something that appeals to people and gives it kind of a softening of the movie, so it's not just all brutalism. But that didn't work for me. And then the I don't know. This is not a critique so much as maybe a question on my part, which is like the accent.
Yeah, I read the question. I
don't know if this was they didn't make it clear in the movie, and it wasn't clear in anything I read whether the accent they used in the movie was particular to a specific place or whether it was just sort of a generic African accent. I think what made it hard was there's this moment where the king tells a European, speak in my language, and he's using an accented language, and then makes the European speak English to him. And so it's very much like, those old movies where like British people were supposed to be Russian, but they were speaking English. And it was just a little bit like
it's
a mishmash of
it's one of
language.
Those for the audience. So like how you should take it is any English you're hearing, because I don't think anybody in the context of the story would have been actually speaking English. So
right.
Any English you're hearing,
English.
Yeah, but any English you're hearing is just for the audience.
Yeah.
Like, to be clear.
But the English you're hearing theoretically should be in a different language, right? It's like that's what we'd be hearing.
So I mean, what
we spoke that language?
I mean, what accent should it be in then?
Not accent, language, right? Like, let's say they were speaking Dahomean. I don't know if that's like if there was a language that, and because we're an English speaking nation, we're getting the translation already done for us right now. The actors are speaking in English, but in our heads they should be speaking Dahomey.
Wes, I'm confused at what you're confused about. It seems like you understand it. It's an American movie, so the characters are going to speak English, but for the sake of the story plot, they're speaking their native tongue. But the Portuguese dudes are still speaking Portuguese and can speak their respective languages because they know them, because they made a point of the king knowing how to speak Portuguese.
Yes.
So
all of that was just distracting. I wasn't necessarily confused as distracted.
Oh my God. That's distracting?
It was distracting.
Wes, how do you watch any movie that doesn't take place in an English-speaking country and they speak English?
No, but couldn't they have just spoken then American English? Like, why make it accented English?
Would you have been okay? First of all, most of the people in that movie...
Why not just speak in African language and give us subtitles? And I know the answer to that too. It's just
why did they speak English in Black Panther? What are we doing here?
But they did. But then they spoke Xhosa too. Like, they were clear about using both of them. It was just the fact that he emphasized like speak my language, and then the language that came out was English. I was like, I get it, but like also distracting. Anyways,
good God.
And in general, I actually thought the movie felt in some ways uneven, and I don't know how else to describe that without spoiling it. It just felt like some of the pacing, some of the action, there were just things in there that I felt like either could have been more fleshed out or less fleshed out or just cut completely that were, more nits to pick, and I don't think it's worth talking about them. I think just in general, I felt like it was a little bit uneven, but so were other movies that I've enjoyed, and so I still enjoyed this one even with that. Were there any hiccups for you, or was this no notes? Let's keep it rolling.
I mean, I enjoyed the movie top to bottom as a whole. Like, I don't have anything that's just stood out as like, oh my goodness, I didn't enjoy this. If anything, what I actually want to double down on is something I liked about the movie. I know we're talking about, I'll get to my hiccup in a sec, but I kind of want to double down that this movie did a really good job of, how do I word this? This is a movie that has themes of slavery, sexual assault, loss of autonomy, really heavy themes, and it doesn't sugarcoat them or water it down, but they
No,
still
they're
executed it.
essential. Yeah, they're essential
Yeah,
parts of the story and characters.
but they executed it all in a very, what I think is tasteful manner, considering the subject matter. So people are getting killed and stabbed, but this wasn't a rated. I think this movie was rated PG-13, right? Like they didn't go all in on just blood and guts to make their point. They didn't go all in on like gratuitous nudity, even through the scenes where like you see some of the women being captured and enslaved and all of that. Like there's almost a game, like there's almost like if this was Game of Thrones, you would have seen way more blood and assault and full frontal nudity that wouldn't have really added anything to it. And I like that they did a good job of showing that this is brutal, right? That these women who are warriors get captured, get killed. You may be, sold into slavery, killed, or worse, right? You see the ramifications of that for multiple characters, but never did it feel like it was so over the top. The director said, "Hey, we're gonna try and shock the audience to make you look away from the screen and be disgusted." I felt the brutality of the people being tied up, and they threw the cold water on them to prepare them for auction, and they're inspecting them, and it was still uncomfortable and drove the point home, but it didn't feel gratuitous. It was as tasteful as I think you can do that subject matter. And frankly, when it comes to any depictions of, like, honestly, I would say anything involving like sexual violence, slavery, any of that stuff, I'm very particular of how you execute it on screen. And, do you make the point while still being tasteful and being recognizing that a lot of audiences are going to see this potentially? And it's something that, side tangent, but like it's made Game of Thrones age a little poorly in that regard. And it's something that I'm just a little more conscious of. So, may I respect to just the overall, just creative team behind the movie of being accurate without being egregious, which can be a tough line to toe. That being said, my biggest wart, I agree, was the Malik storyline. It wasn't necessary. I get what they were trying to do with him, but I think everything you said was on the money. He didn't have enough screen time for that plot to develop meaningfully. It didn't mean a lot in the end, which I actually think is okay, because if it had meant a lot, I would have been really upset with the movie. But
maybe that's true.
I would have been livid. But like, it's still just one of those. Y'all could have gotten you could have taken him out the movie and nothing of huge value would have been lost just by virtue of all the other dope characters or sequences you could have extended.
Yeah.
And,
Well, and
I
part
really
of that
would've-
is he never went through any development. Right? We get a few lines about like what his backstory was, but that's it. I mean, we really don't get his perspective. We're not with him for enough time to really see him develop.
Well, they try to develop him by emphasizing that, his the complexity of his culture. There's the sequence where he meets the king, right? And the king even says like, "Hey, yo, this is maybe this is a little spoilery, but like, you're welcome here." You're welcome here. I think that is some of the development, because he never was cool with just his, people he works with, how they make their money, right? He was never really explicitly cool with that. He meets the people in this village and he says, "Hey, I have roots here." And the guy's like, "Oh, well, this is your people too. You're cool. You're welcome here." I think that is his development. Like, I think I know what they were going for. This is just I don't think it was a bad idea. I just think execution wise, it didn't fit into the flow of the movie. But I know exactly what they were going for. Nothing felt like, oh, this came out of nowhere. It was just we didn't need this here. Like, we could have cut this out and the movie still, all the main points and beats of the movie could have still hit just fine. Maybe that ending sequence goes a little different, but I'm with you. It's just, it wasn't necessary. That's the biggest thing. And there's cool stuff in this movie that we could have gotten more of that I would have taken over his scenes, straight up.
He was very physically attractive, though. I'll say that. Good
I
job.
get what they was going for. We're gonna put in a pretty biracial dude who's gonna be sympathetic. I get his role in terms of this as a movie that's a business trying to get this bread. I get it. They sending this Fabio looking dude up in here with the little trim mustache and the long silky hair. Yeah, then they got a scene of this man. They really hit us with him bathing in the river scene. I'm just like, yo, what is this thirst trappery? I mean, it's fine, but it's just like it felt very. And I say this and I recognize that there's a million movies where they do this to women on the regular of just, hey, here's a scene that's just for the male gaze and just fan service. I get it, I call out those scenes too, but I was like, oh my god, they don't get this Ken doll looking dude off the screen. I mean, the actor, like the actor wasn't a bad actor. He was cool. Like I thought all the actors were fine. It was just, yeah, he didn't add a lot to the story. That's the
Yeah.
biggest issue. Other than that, I enjoy. Like I'm not gonna pretend like this is my movie of the year, the best movie I've ever seen, but
Enjoyable.
I watched it and I was genuinely entertained from top to bottom. And at the end, I'm like, hey, I'm glad I watched this movie. That's how I felt.
I'm glad because I feel like it wasn't really on your radar. We had kind of mentioned it a few times, and you had kind of said like, yeah, whatever. And then like even yesterday, you were like, where do I find this movie? I was like,
yeah. I mean, I'm a Viola Davis fan, but it's just, you know what? There were
her as an action.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Not something you're gonna expect, right? You're like, no, she can't do that. This lady who's like Amanda Waller just sits behind the scenes, or like How to Get Away with Murder, where she's just like a professor. This lady is not, or The Help, she's a maid, right? This lady is not an action. She doesn't have the resume to be an action star, and she does a great job. Or her choreography, or whoever, stunt double, great job. Really stands out. Never distracting about ooh, that's like a weird move. They softened that for her. Like this lady's probably in her 60s, right? At this point,
she's 57.
50s, and just she works it, man. She
was in her mid 50s making this movie. She's my mama age making this movie.
Very believable as an action star. So many hat tips to her for that. I could not say enough good things about that. It really does work. And if you're skeptical about Viola Davis as a action hero,
that opening sequence, I was sold the instant the movie started. That's the fight scene at the beginning of the movie. And man, you just see Viola Davis come out the bushes, and then she all sweaty and glistening and shit. And then her and her people start going to work. I was instantly sold on them. I was like, oh yeah, the Dora Milaje better roll back, better fall back, man. Viola Davis in this but get Okoye, get her up in this thing. She was, and man, I don't know who her trainer was, but dog, she must have had whoever Angela Bassett had for Wakanda Forever. Because I was like, oh my god, I do not want to piss Viola Davis off. She would beat the brakes off of me. Like, I don't know if she's still maintaining that physique, but I'd be a bully if I was built like her and the way she was in that movie. I'd be going around starting shit, bumping people at the grocery store, looking at them like, "What's up? What's up? You trying to start something? Let's go, bro." I could not be trusted with that power, and I'm glad they entrusted it with Viola Davis. I think she, if anybody, can handle it.
Hurt people, Vonnie. I get it. All right, so there has been some chatter. I don't think it's very loud, but there's been some chatter I've seen like on my social media feeds that there's some criticism that this movie, despite getting pretty good critical review, never really got much buzz as any of the Oscar nominees or any of the Oscar awards. I don't think their director was nominated in Best Director. Which obviously I think we both think that, the director did a really good job here in keeping the story focused and building it out and having the actors do what they do best. It didn't get nominated for Best Picture. Is that something for this movie or in general that you care about? Like for me, I'm like, yes, I care that a movie that's really good and is led by, many Black women and Black actors, and is not a movie necessarily that's like capitalizing on Black trauma, or it empowers, I think, Black stories here.
It's great at the worst.
Yeah, and it's detailed, it's complex, and it didn't get even a recognition compared to something like Top Gun, which arguably you could say is like a far less complex movie. It didn't certainly had a bigger box office impression, right? But didn't have the complex storylines here. Wasn't building up into the storylines that were here.
Wasn't a remake.
And got a Best Picture nod, right? Got a Best Picture nomination. So it's like, well, and I heard a podcast say like, there were sort of different categories about how people got, or how movies got nominated this year. It seemed like they recognized movies that were big hits, like Top Gun, like box office hits, right? Pulled in the numbers. They recognized smaller movies that were that brought that like very like detailed study and you know what we classically think of as like best picture material, dramas and things like that. And then there was kind of some quirky movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once, you know, did. But I'm just like, there should have been probably a place for this movie, but you know, there's only 10, and I don't know what one I would take out necessarily. Maybe it's Maverick, but I think the nomination for Maverick was literally probably because it just ended up having such a huge box office impression last year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in general, yeah, I definitely care. In specific, though, I do think like, was this a masterpiece? Was this a masterclass in movie making? Was this something where like in 15 years, people are going to look back and say, wow, that was just a seminal movie, or that was a movie that really set the stage for things, or was this a movie that really showed us how to make movies? I don't think so. You know, it really just was an action movie. It's John Wick. It's
Well, I wouldn't say all that.
you know, I've never seen John Wick. It's an action movie to its core, you know, and so
I don't know if I'd say all that. Ooh.
Oh, I think it's an action movie to its core. Anyways, is it a masterpiece? No. So like, am I gonna die on the hill that it should have had some nominations? Like, probably not. But is it questionable that like it didn't get nods when some other movies did? I think that's for sure a legitimate discussion to have around it. And is it not getting the cultural impact it had or could have had because it's seen as like a quote unquote black movie, right? And that's a problem with society at large, not necessarily a problem with the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are all things I think tied up with that discussion that I think some people online are feeling like, this feels like a slight, you know, and maybe I think even the director has kind of weighed in. I think she said that she also felt kind of slighted that she wasn't included.
I mean, so it's complicated, right? My thoughts on that, because on one hand, I've said before and many times that I don't give a damn about award shows, period, because there's no consistency in what makes something good.
Sure.
Movies are subjective, all that stuff. A bunch of stuff of just subjectivity of art, and trying to do it in this way is like, cool, it's self-serving for like a certain subset of people, but this isn't what I use to validate whether something's good or not. That being said, I understand that people who work hard on these movies want recognition because that is good for their own resumes, careers, and what they're passionate about. So I'm not going to try and act like it shouldn't be important to people who, you know, if there's an award for something that I'm really involved in, I'm still going to want to win it, even if I recognize the subjectivity of it all, right? So that's one thing. So on one hand, who cares? It's an award show. Who needs the validation of these folks? On the other hand, you kind of do, because that does affect what is seen as profitable, what can be commercially successful, what might get greenlit down the line, all of this. And I do feel that I think that the movie did suffer a little bit in that regard. So my point, I guess, more so being that, you know, it'll always just stand out to me that whenever you have a lot of these black-led movies that do get Oscar nominations, to your point, it's the ones that capitalize on black trauma rather than have it be a different interpretation of it. So if it's a slave movie where somebody's getting their ass beat the whole movie, or someone who, you know, like The Help or all this other stuff where it's just, all right, this black person's on a receiving end of an L in a white-dominated society, it's not lost on me that those movies are way more likely to get critical acclaim than a movie like this that, keep in mind, it still talks into like the two-sided complicated nature of slavery, right? Because a big theme in the movie is the people, the
Oyo and the Dahomey.
Yes, like both of these are like African nations that do sell their prisoners their captives into slavery, right? Into like the white slave trade. And like that's a real thing. But then it's complicated because, you know, okay, even with the king, he talks about how, okay, my brother used to sell our own people. I only sell our captives. Like, but even them, there's a bit of a moral gray area of where does the line cross between what we consider acceptable and not. So it wasn't like it was a black and white type of story of, oh, this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing. It's complicated. So I think we got a nuanced take on a topic you don't see often, but it's not lost on me that this movie, to be clear,
you're not saying it's complicated whether slavery is okay.
No, but I'm saying is that within the context, within the context of the movie,
I just wanted to clarify in case anybody was listening and was like, did Savon just say slavery has a complicated, like, you know, right or wrongness to it?
No, but in the context of the characters in the movie, it's not as simple as, oh, slavery bad, because for them, there are layers to it. Because for them, there's clearly a line between, okay, well, selling our enemies who we defeated into slavery is not the same as selling our own people into slavery. And for some people, that is a big deal. Some characters in the movie, it's like, hey, that's a big deal. To others, it's like, oh, that's totally acceptable. So my point more so is that even in the movie itself, the conflict of slavery has like, there's multiple factions and sides, and some of them involve black people who are on different sides of a conflict. It's, it's not as cut and dry as you think, as it might be portrayed in other movies. So to me, this movie, again, well, I'm not gonna pretend it was this perfect thing, but I look at movies and what gets nominated for awards, and I won't pretend that I'm super impressed by those movies that they're doing something amazing. To your point, Top Gun ain't bad or anything, but Top Gun is, a generic American, military might movie that even you have admitted they don't really care a lot of. The story isn't really what's important, and it's a remake. So not to say that disqualifies it, but to me that says a lot about what the bar actually is and where it can be. So do I care? No, but it's not lost on me that Hollywood is particular about what kind of movies gets those real big nominations. And sometimes it is about the bread and how much money they bring in, but sometimes it's, I mean, we've seen the memes about like what Oscar bait movies are. And frankly, a lot of those movies I don't find particularly compelling. Like, what was good about The Revenant? Like, what was great? What was so special about The Revenant that's like, oh, we're gonna look back and say this was some amazing movie?
I never saw
it. so I don't know if it was some movie that should have won a bunch of awards, but the inconsistency and standards of which stuff gets nominated is not lost on me. And it is disappointing that a movie like this that I think did a lot of really, we talk about, oh, we need fresh ideas, we need new things, stuff that people haven't done before. Well, this movie did a lot of that. And clearly there's still just a case of, hey, sometimes audience just want to eat up what is safe and we know people will like. And the reality, it sucks, but the reality is that a movie with a bunch of black women leads in a story that's not really talked about a lot in this context with a majority black African cast is just not going to have that same level of appeal. Or theoretically, at least from like some of these suits, it doesn't. I think it can and should. I think, like I said, I thought the movie was great, but there's plenty of movies that get way more critical acclaim that I think are objectively worse than this movie. So I don't know what that says about my standards in movies or how things are evaluated, but it is what it is. Forget them people. You should still, I think generally most people should watch this movie. It's genuinely entertaining. And at the very least, I won't pretend that it's super everything about it historically accurate either, because most historical movies that are based upon there's some inaccuracies, but this is definitely a good movie to kind of open the Pandora's box of learning more about these topics. And it's already gotten me kind of reading into just, okay, I didn't really know about these peoples and their traditions, and it's already been in some interesting reads. So,
oh, nice.
I
think
yeah.
I think we should also probably acknowledge that we're two younger middle-aged guys talking about this, and we don't have a woman's perspective on this either, and we don't have a black woman's perspective on this, and maybe they would feel differently or strongly in one way or the other about sort of that same question. So we should acknowledge that we're biased here for sure. We have our own own blind spots around this. And you made me think too around like the stereotype of like the angry black woman, right, is not something that we see here, right? We see women that are fierce, we see women that are powerful and strong, but they're not angry black women in that sense, right? So we're not getting that picture, that trope that comes off, and we see them being soft in many ways and being vulnerable in many ways. And that's going to lead us to my next question, which was, which characters did you enjoy the most throughout the movie? For me, I really enjoyed the actors and the moments where they were being vulnerable, where they were struggling with something. Naoi, Naniska, and Izogi were all struggling with different aspects of their lives and their histories and their pasts, and how to move forward in the present in a way that was strong and powerful and meaningful, and brought them more connection to each other. And I just thought like all of those actors were able to do that in a really strong way throughout the movie. It was like from start to finish, we always got those moments that really built up their characters and rounded out their characters in a way that was really cool. So I thought that to me stood out. I'll stop there. Did any of the characters, did you really enjoy or kind of bathe in their development?
Yeah, I mean, Viola Davis top to bottom throughout the movie. She was just an amazing lead. And I mean, without adding, again, this is the strength of Black Panther too. The Black Panther series as well, is that what makes these characters work is that they're not being put into a box where I think, even when you talk about like the angry black person, black woman, any of those tropes, a lot of times that's because they're being contrasted to a white audience. And that kind of is an element of what boxes them in. But none of these characters are being put into a box of, oh, you're black, so you have to like do X, Y, and Z. These characters are all simply warrior women, and how their warrior womanhood shows up is just like case by case, right? Like, we have Viola Davis, who kind of has to deal with her own past trauma and anger, but also like we've seen her biggest thing through the movie is just, I say all the time, not letting the salt consume you. She's got beef and she's gonna handle her beef. Her biggest thing throughout the movie is self-doubt and getting over her own beef. Meanwhile, is it not Nancy? Nawi, sorry. And for Nawi's biggest conflict throughout the movie is her desire to her kind of free spirited, do her own thing mentality.
Well, she wants to be the hero too, right?
Yeah, and she wants to help her, her wanting to help people, and then that contrasting with being a good soldier. All right, what's the line? Even they criticize her for helping her friend during, that little barb spike training session thing of, hey, why'd you save her? Like, she's my friend. I want her to do well. She's conflicting between that and being a good soldier who always follows orders. It works because all of their
Clone Wars reference.
Yeah, but it works because all of their conflicts are very real. None of them feel shoehorned. None of them feel like, oh, this has to tie into this element of their identity. Now, obviously, the theme of womanhood and, some of the vulnerabilities they face as women is something that the movie does not shy away from. But still, I don't think it boxes in any of the characters, because even them, when facing with conflict, all approach it different ways. One character when captured says, okay, I'd rather die than be a slave. Another says, nah, we're going to value our life and not no fear. And another's in the camp of, I just want revenge against my enemies. Like, that's three of the best characters in the movie who, even in the wake of the same potential fate, go about it in very different ways. And, it's natural and it works. But for me, Viola Davis, she was just amazing. Her strength, her leadership, her being harsh but kind with people. That little bit of, she's a brutal warrior, but she still has that empathy of, hey, I care for my people, and we can't be in just, we need to stop doing the whole selling folks into slavery in general. I don't know. She just was but her still having that character of dealing with her dreams, but still feeling a little separated from her culture. I don't know. She just felt like she was a grizzled badass general. And I was sold on that from the beginning of the movie. And every scene she was in, I genuinely enjoyed it, because you could just, I don't know, Viola Davis just sold me on just that like old badass energy. Every time she stared people down, I was just like, yo, that is a brow beater. She will stare you down and make you will blink. You will blink before she does.
Yeah. And
again,
and some of that though, yeah, but some of that leads to, or that is a part of her fallibility too, right? Like,
exactly.
She's a general and she's very wise, and yet her inflexibility to certain ideas is something that she has to examine as the course of the movie goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And so and
her adherence to her beef, right? Because isn't there a whole sequence where she goes after Nawi for like not following the plan, but even one of her people's like, hey, yo,
you didn't
follow the plan either.
Like, she's like, no, that was the plan. No, but they were like, but that wasn't the plan together, right? And
yeah, it's like, hey, yo, you still a leader. People need you. You can't just throw your life away over your personal beef. Yeah. And you gotta like learn how to reconcile that. So not to mention the big twist in the movie we haven't even talked about that, which we won't obviously because spoiler, but I don't know. I feel like people should watch this movie, if not only because everybody's a good actor. Even if you're not into the premise and the action and all that, it's just people being genuinely good actors, and there's something about that I'll watch damn near anything if it's just high quality acting. Point blank.
Amen. I could use more jokes. Just kidding. All right.
That movie was not. There was no humor. There is no humor in this movie.
Throw me a bone. All right.
There's like one moment where you get a laugh and like maybe two, but you get a chuckle.
All right. This will be the last question. Because this is at its core an action movie, Savon. Was there any?
No, you can't just say that like it's fact. Get out of here, dog. Not to say that it's not an action movie, but say at its core.
Because at its core, it was an action movie. Was there any action sequences or weapons that you were into? Because man, I mean, we already talked about Viola Davis fighting, so I'm not going to get into that. It was cool to see her just like pull off these moves and her physicality that she brought to it, and it really did feel natural. It wasn't like, oh, this is someone who's dancing as a fight. It was like, nah, she's into it. She's doing the stunts, and I'm sure she had a stunt, performer as well who was in there doing a great job. So, a lot of the Viola Davis scenes were just really cool, and they didn't shy away from the fact that like if she's fighting against men, there are points where she's going to be at a disadvantage, and they showed that. And so, it wasn't like, oh man, she's just like this elite, supernatural
Everybody
warrior.
get clapped up.
Yeah, everybody took their licks, and I think that was a good choice on there to have it be that way. Um, the only other thing I wanted to really shout out was kind of and they didn't show this in the movie, so it came out of nowhere, was Nawi being able to use the rope with the knife attached to it.
Yeah.
I think that's an Asian weapon, but it doesn't matter. It was just really cool to see her busted out in the middle of a fight. Like, oh, she's like reached elite status now. Because in the beginning of the movie, she's very green. She doesn't know what she's doing. And there's a point at which she kind of breaks out this like rope and knife attachment and starts like whipping people's asses with it. That was pretty cool. It's like, oh, like what a cool like power or skill to add to her repertoire, so to speak, on screen.
Agreed. For me, it was the training sequences actually. When it comes to most movies that have like a lot of fighting and action sequences, a big part is, okay, how earned does this feel when you're watching this for these characters? If it feels like they haven't earned the badassery, then you're not sold on it, and it feels like, oh, they just made them magically get better at the thing, right? And that can suspend your disbelief and take you out of the movie, and then that hurts the movie a lot. I enjoyed all of, they had like this is the good thing about this movie, that there's not one training montage. There's just lots of just snippets of training from the movie top to bottom. Would you'd agree with that, right, Wes?
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the beginning you see training sequences, beginning, middle,
It's not
towards
like
the end.
Mulan where they go like through this training and all, like you see the progression in like 30 seconds from novice to expert.
They sing "I Make a Man Out of You" and then they're all badass warriors ready to take on the Huns. Like, that's not what this was. No shade to Mulan, but like they got badass after the sequence, right? The song made them better.
Yeah.
In this, you see the
To
slow
be fair,
progression.
that's a badass song.
No, it's an amazing song. I'll go watch. I just watch that on YouTube every now and again when I just need to feel something. You know what I'm saying? I get it. I love it. Mulan's one of my favorite Disney. She's probably my favorite Disney princess. Keep it a beam. But whatever.
She's pretty dope.
She's awesome. Goated. But yeah, the training montages are great. There's, from the beginning of them learning how to use their blades and the importance of having a proper blade to cut off the mannequin heads, to just sequences where you see the men and women all just like fighting and training. Some of it's like hand-to-hand combat, brawling, from the different rites of passage for the women warriors who have to run through those briars and climb. It's like a real boot camp thing where you have to run through like these plants that are going to cut your skin up, and you're going through barefoot. All of that just sold me on, even just like them running sequences. They were just going for long military style, like something that fell straight out of like a Jarhead war movie, like a World War II war movie, of just all them jogging with their backpack, and it's just, keep up, soldier. I don't know. It made the fight scenes and badassery scenes feel well earned. And then to your point, Wes, they still weren't infallible. So it's still a war. It's still a fight. I don't care how good you are at fighting. You could be the most badass fighter. If somebody just blindsides you and catch you lacking, you're gonna lose. That's not a matter of skill. That's just the chaos of battle. And it works because even in the big battles throughout the show, some of our main characters lose. Like, they kill people. They get a nice little body count, but they lose. They get captured. People take injuries. There's real consequences and stakes to the fight. So even the character you're rooting for, they get established as a badass fighter. So hey, this person isn't trash. But even people who are good lose sometimes. And I don't know, it sells you on the movie because you see some of them get captured. You see some of these women get killed. And it balances, it adds a little bit of realness for every super badass move they do to kill somebody else, which is like, oh, awesome. I don't know. It was the same reason I enjoyed the action sequences in this movie for the same reason I enjoyed them in Prey, where it felt like both sides were legitimate threats to one another, and they didn't downplay the threat of these women and their skill, but didn't make them invincible either. And that's a very hard line to toe, where you show off someone's badassery, but they're not invincible either. Thought that line was very well executed. Like even in the first fight against, that Viola Davis has against the first guy who she's beefed out with, they're scrapping, but it is a back and forth. Like she is a skilled fighter, and it is clear from that scrap, but she does not win. It's a stalemate, and she still takes some good licks. The choreography and stuff was very well done.
A+. All right, well, that'll finish this up.
A+
The
choreography.
Woman King. The Woman King on Netflix. By the way, the title of the movie really expected me to see her be like the king. I'm not gonna spoil the end.
Did you not? Yeah, watch them. Yeah, just watch the movie.
Maybe I didn't see the intro well enough or something. I don't know.
Did you not see?
I'm still at the end. I'm still confused about like what her role is. But now that would be a spoiler. We'll talk about this after.
Yeah, we'll talk about this after because I don't want to spoil this for people. But yeah, bro, this is more cut and dry than you think.
Okay. Maybe I just missed the beginning part.
It's okay. Kyle is crawling on your face.
It probably hit us up on @confidently_pod Instagram. We'll post some reels. We want to know what you think of this movie. Was it great? Was it good? Was it meh? How did you take it? And I guess if you're a woman out there listening, tell us what you thought because we haven't got that perspective.
Ladies,
yeah, it's ladies' night. Tell us. All right, see ya. Bye, Savon. Have fun at the farmers market.